So for those tuning in, this is my friend Rick Aberman. We've known each other a long, long time. He's such a talented person in the area of mental health and family counseling. He's worked with many leaders in our industry in sports and professional sports. He happens to live in Minneapolis. And Rick, would you mind sharing with those folks that might be tuning in a little bit about your background and how you got into this business and how we got to know one another?
Sure, it's a pleasure, John. It's great to be here with you today. So I began my career as a psychologist at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And this was in the days when we were really the first athletic department in the university to employ a psychologist, not so much for the performance side per se, although that was part of it, but really to deal with the mental health of the place and both the student athletes, the staff, the administration, you name it. And so I was there for a number of years, and then moved back to Minneapolis, where I am from, and started working with some teams at the University of Minnesota. My practice was shifting, and was affiliated with, and still have been, with a number of the professional teams up here. And the Twins, the Vikings, the university, things like that. And I do quite a bit of consulting on the corporate side as well. Everything from, smaller companies to bigger companies like like American Express and Federal Reserve banks, and focusing mostly on senior leadership effectiveness and how can we help people perform at their potential, whatever their talent level. So that's what I do now, and I've had the pleasure of working with you, John. I think we got connected around, we were talking about the training and the development of emotional intelligence and how that's helpful to you, your conference, and the people that you lead as well. And so we've been at it for a while, and you're still learning, and I'm still learning, and it's been a good thing.
Well, you've been an extraordinary help, and Rick, that's exactly right. We had this very talented faculty rep, Ed Deem, at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He introduced me to some of the people on his staff as we talked about emotional intelligence. That led us to you. And in fact, Rick, I believe we had you in front of our entire ADs group a while back to talk about leadership. So I wanted to spend some time talking with you about that today. Of course, a lot of the times in our leadership journey, we talked about these hard skills of resilience and of achievement and goal setting, but we find ourselves in this really unique time now. Could you share with us what you're thinking about, what you're learning about this softer skill of, we're just in this difficult time where we have to help one another. So could you teach us a little bit on how we might do that better and how important that is right now in this COVID-19 world we're living in?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a time where we have always said that we're in the people business and the relationship business, but this is probably a time where that really comes into play at the forefront, I think, of everything we do. So I'm hoping that our conversation today will focus on the human side, or the people side, if you will, of what we're about. And so a little less on recruiting and goal achievement and revenues and things like that. I think while albeit an important, I think what's going to get us through these things, and quite honestly take us well into the future, is to be able to be conscious and continually have at the forefront the people that we're leading in this human side. So that's what we're facing right now.
And Rick, here's what I'm seeing. I'm on the phone a lot with college presidents,
yes,
with ADs, and with coaches.
Right.
And they're all under tremendous amounts of stress. Their worlds have kind of been turned upside down, but they all have different perspectives. Certainly the issues that are going on with our college presidents and their decision making are different than at the AD level and different at the coach level. The other thing I'm seeing is people are just exhausted doing what you and I are doing, doing the Zoom meetings. They're
No,
exhausted. So how
yeah.
can we learn about that and help each other through that? Do you have any advice for us? Because I see a lot of people. I would say it's almost technology burnout. So can you help us with that?
It does feel like it. It's a different kind. Really, when we start to think about what we're doing, and I'm speaking with all these people as well, although much of it is virtual now. And so it takes a different kind of energy. This, what we're being called upon to do right now, this kind of thing that you and I are doing right now here, John, this focus attention, staring at this screen, following everything that you're saying and doing, and for 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes longer, we're zeroed in. And this is similar to like trying to be like in the zone 100% of the time. And that just is not natural. It just doesn't work. And quite honestly, it's impossible. When we have normal communication over the phone or in person more so, our minds tend to wander. And this is how we are actually set up and wired to function. We can only have focused attention for very, very small periods of time. And the wandering mind is the brain's way of recovery. And when we're locked into this kind of technology and this focus and attention, our minds can't wander. And so by the end of the call, by the end of this period of time, we are wasted. It takes a lot of energy. And now the reality is this is better than nothing. I'd rather be sitting in a room with you, but this is going to be as good as we can get right now. So I'll take it. That said, I have to learn how to build in recovery so that I can properly manage my energy so that I can be effective to the people that I want to be available to. And so I'm wanting us to think more about, less about time management and more about energy management, and learning that, we have to pay attention to what's going on inside of us. So this is an emotional competency skill. We have to become self-aware. We have to pay attention to, well, what am I feeling? What is going on here? So I can make better decisions about how I want to be. And so I can pay attention to how I'm feeling and when I need to recover and take care of myself. So basic self-care, and we can go into this deeper here, but this is something that's now pushed right up to the forefront.
And so, Rick, what do we do to I can only express how I feel. After these Zoom calls, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I don't really know if I need to just take a break, take a walk, be distracted. What's your advice? What should we be doing to take care of ourselves? Because one of the things I've learned from you is if you can't take care of yourself, it's really difficult to be, as you would say, available to others. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
That's exactly right. So there's a number of things we can do. First of all, we're all used to performing at pretty high levels over longer periods of time. So one of the things what we want to do is take a look at the structures in our activities and think about the energy management. So instead of going back to back to back meetings, maybe shorten them up a little bit. Have some breaks in between. Have a 10-minute break or a 15-minute break. That's about as much as we can handle. A 45-minute piece, that's way overextending, but we can do it. And get up, move around. Yes, you are absolutely right. Movement, change of scenery, get some fresh air. Make sure you're hydrated. Think about this in the same way we tell our student athletes that we want to be able to prepare for performance. So you wouldn't just go into a performance without warming up, without stretching, without eating, without being rested, without being hydrated and all those things. We need to see ourselves in that same light right now. So that's one thing. And that's a huge thing. So that as we go through our day, we make sure, you know what, it's lunchtime. Even though I've been sitting in this screen and I'm not going to the cafeteria or out to a restaurant, I need to carve out some time to rest and recovery, for rest and recovery. And that's really important now, so that by the end of the day, the energy drain that we may feel is a good energy drain, not one where we're just totally wasted. And again, I want to go a little deeper into that on how we do that. But I think that's a great place to start, just logistically.
It's such a good perspective, and I never really thought about it that way. But as our student athletes do prepare, they're resting, they're eating right, they're hydrating. As leaders, we should probably be doing the same things. And then after we perform, that's a pretty full day of work. You need to have a recovery time. So
Exactly.
it really makes a lot of sense, but it takes some, what's the right word I'm looking for? We have to be, we have to make sure we do it.
So again, we're all involved in the sports world here. And in the sports world and in the business world, we know that the things that we rely on that make us successful are the things like habits, discipline, routines, structures. All of those kinds of things help ground us and organize our day, organize our training, whatever it is. Well,
and gosh, we've lost that, haven't we, Rick?
It's like, exactly. Yeah. And so now we're a little bit disoriented here, and we can't just wing it. I mean, we can try, but then like you say, the end of the day, you're sprawled out on the couch and you're not available to anybody anymore. And so what we want to do is we want to start creating some of those things on our own, because those societal structures are shifted, and they will continue to be shifted. We all are dealing with the notion of higher education or education in general and sports in general. It's going to look a little bit different. And so it's going to be a new orientation. And those are things that as individuals, we can start practicing right now, with the understanding that the lack of those things, that change, and more important, that ambiguity, is creating a tremendous amount of stress and ambiguity. And I like to think of ambiguity and stress being the exact same thing. So when we're in states of ambiguity, we have high levels of stress. And there's all kinds of research on this, but this is part of the fatigue that we're feeling, and it impacts our decision-making ability. So we have to take much better care of ourselves now in terms of being really intentional about self-care in order to be effective to the people that we are leading.
Rick, that was exactly the word I was searching for. I think you would say, because you and I have talked about it, it's this notion of intentionality. We have to be more intentional, because all of our routines, all of our habits have really kind of evaporated, if you will, over this last 8 weeks or so. Isn't that right? We have to be more intentional.
No, that's absolutely right, because that's how we're going to start grounding ourselves. So really now we're asking some real fundamental questions we're being confronted with that most of us probably should be asking ourselves all along, but we've been so busy and caught up in our activities that we've gotten distant from them. So really asking questions like, who am I? How do I want to be? Where am I headed? Some really basic, fundamental human questions. And so we start asking ourselves, what are our values? What's important to me? How do I want to respond? There's things happening to me all around the world that I can't control. But what I can control is my response, how I want to be. And then more importantly, where am I headed here? Where is the growth opportunity? What direction do I want to go? How do I move out, get unstuck out of this stressful tension and move forward so that I can create opportunities and continue to grow? Because that's really what human beings are designed to do.
This whole notion of who am I and who do I want to be and what was this new envisioned future look like? It's the same with an organization like the Horizon League. So I think part of my responsibility, part of all of our responsibilities as leaders, is to ask ourselves those questions organizationally in these groups. Could you talk about that a bit?
That's absolutely. And that's As you say, we've spoken about this over the course of our relationship, because things keep happening and the world doesn't stand still. And we want to be able to grow with this versus stay stuck in the past. And so something has happened to us that in a sense is creating an opportunity to look internally versus externally and define what I call internally, so that we know how to be out in the world. And organizations this is their challenge right now. And those that are willing and able to go through this process, I think are going to be the ones that are going to not only survive, but are going to thrive in the future. So, we think about from an organizational standpoint, when we're formed, kind of our values and what we're about and all that. And then we kind of let that go. And then we just go about our business. But we do so in a way where we tend to get disconnected and far distant from these things. So we want to come back to those and say, okay, we can't control, we don't know what's going to happen moving forward. But let's start planning about how we want to be in this kind of new environment. And part of that involves vulnerability. Part of that is courage. Part of that is, a big part of it is flexibility and adaptability. And so those are things that are going to help us move forward.
And I love those words. We are in a vulnerable time. We need the connection with people. We need to be adaptive. We need to be flexible. And it really does now come full circle about where we started. At these individual leadership moments can also be collective leadership moments, and all of these things we can think about it collectively as well as individually. So as we try to figure out how we stay connected, we want to think about that as an organization as well. Is that right, Rick?
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. So this gets back to, let me back up a second, John. So when we think about the individual, a lot of these same concepts are transferred into the organization, and we can extrapolate and use the same thing as a group. But don't forget, we're still dealing with people. So when I think of leadership, I think it's really important. Good leadership, I think of three different things. I think about that are required, especially today, during these times. We need to have honesty. So we need to have a good sense of awareness, what's going on. So we need to be honest with people. We need to have empathy, a good understanding of where other people are at and their experience, not only my own experience, but the experience of others. And that can be challenging, but that's critical. And then the third one is competency. So good leaders are made up of those three things. Competency in that, we're able to problem solve. When things get tough, and people are under stress, we go into that survival mode, that sort of fight or flight position. And what happens is it limits our ability to think. Physiologically, it interferes with our ability to access our prefrontal cortex, without getting too technical about it, but that's our decision-making area of the brain. We lose the ability to get creative, and in a sense, our worlds shrink. Well, everybody is feeling fear and anxiety right now. And in order to be empathic, we have to have the vulnerability and the courage to own that ourselves, and to be able to say and recognize it in myself and say that I recognize that in you as well. And so that people, once we do that, have a sense of understanding. They feel, oh, I'm understood. You don't have to have an answer, but what we want to do is help people feel understood. Otherwise, they feel like there's something wrong with them, or I'm crazy, or whatever it is, and that's not the case. And then because we're able to self-manage, manage our own emotions that we're aware of, and our own fears and anxieties, we can then act in a competent manner, in a calm manner, in terms of the decisions that we make and the communications of those decisions. So then we can be honest, we have the empathy, and we have the competence. And then people will follow. people will trust. And that's all we're trying to do, is to develop a sense of trust for people.
Rick, that's such a good, maybe an ending moment for us for this session. I think I wanted to make sure these sessions were meaningful, but also to use your good advice, not too long, but just let me just wrap that up and give you the final word. This notion of honesty, empathy, and competence, that really sums up where we need to be right now in our leadership walk. And so I would say thank you. And if you could wrap us up with one final word, and my hope is that you and I might be able to do a couple of more of these sessions as a resource for literally everyone in our league, but particularly our board, our coaches, our ADs, and to some extent our student athletes. I think we're all in the same space.
No, my pleasure, and we will. We'll do that. I'll look forward to it. Thank you for the invitation. You know, the last thing I want to say, and we mentioned this in the beginning, John, was around self-care. So when we talk about self-care, it's not just figuring out how to get through your day or get through it, but you know, we talk about the walks and the breathing and the getting outside and the exercise, and all those things are great. But there's one other thing that I want to mention, and that is, don't be afraid to say no. Sometimes we feel when we're in a position of leadership that we have to be available to everybody whenever they want or whenever they ask. And we try and do that, and pretty soon we're not available to ourselves. So I think in order to maintain one's effectiveness and sanity, quite honestly, it's okay to say no. Have boundaries. And you don't have to be rude about it. It's just a way of protecting yourself and caring for yourself, because these things take energy. So make decisions around that, protect yourself, have some boundaries, and I think that we'll end up getting energy as we go through the days versus being spent at the end of the days. And if we are spent, it's a good spent.